Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk About It. Today we are discussing the Derek Chauvin, Chauvin case or murder trial. And so I wanted to gather a panel just to talk about the case and why it is important and some of the testimonies that we have witnessed. And so today I want to introduce my fabulous panel. And so we have Pastor James Hall, who's going to introduce himself, Attorney Dennis Sweet. We have Danielle Holmes and Duvier Malone. Thank you all so much for joining us. All right, Pastor Hall, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is James Hall. I'm here in Tupelo, Mississippi. I am the founder and president of the Mississippi Trailblazers Group, which is a multidimensional community action group that tries to partner up with business and community action agencies just to try to make our community better. I started in community activism and public service in 1964 when I attended my first freedom school, and I've been trying to be in the fight ever since, just trying to do my little part to do my little work.
Thank you so much. All righty. Attorney Sweet.
Good day, everyone. I'm Dennis Sweet IV. I'm a practicing attorney here in Jackson, Mississippi, also in Washington, D.C. I primarily do civil rights work as well as criminal defense and personal injury. I've been doing civil rights cases similar to this for some time, about 12 years now. And I had some good success doing it. It's a passion of mine. So I look forward to any type of conversations that we can deal with people's rights and the lives of Black people and disenfranchised people, particularly. I also teach at Tougaloo College. I've been teaching for about 8 years, and I teach law classes, and I'm active in the Pre-Law Society.
Thank you so much. Now, Danielle Holmes.
Hi, my name is Danielle Holmes, National Field Team Lead with the Poor People's Campaign. Excuse me, the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for more revival. I live in Jackson, Mississippi, born and raised in the Mississippi Delta, Greenwood, Mississippi. I've been doing activism work for quite some time here in the state of Mississippi, and just very interested in what's going on with George Floyd murder and the trial that's going on with with the officer. I forgot his name.
That's his name. Derek is his name. All right. And Duvier, I always butcher your name. So go ahead and introduce yourself, Mr. Malone.
Hey, Dr. J. So, hello, everyone. My name is Duvalier Malone. I'm a political commentator here in Washington, D.C., and the founder of my own consulting firm here, Duvalier Malone Enterprises, where my organization, we go into underserved areas to shed a light on issues such as poverty, economic development, as well as a media aspect where we try and bring media attention to civil rights cases. So I was involved with Dr. J recently with the Emmett Till case. So I'm really excited to have an opportunity to have this conversation today. I think Emmett Till's story and George Floyd's story both were very similar in nature. So excited to have the conversation this evening.
All righty, you guys. So let's jump right into it. So I want to start off by talking about the prosecution had a powerful opening statement. Did you all watch the opening statements?
Without a doubt, and it was powerful. It was very convincing, and I think throughout the course of this conversation, I'm going to state what I think are three irrefutable facts, three knowns that we know. And the first one I'd like to introduce is just based on the prosecution's opening argument. One of my three irrefutable knowns is Derek Chauvin is guilty of murder. Now, that has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not he'll be convicted. We don't know what the defense is going to present to rebut what's already been done. But I have no doubt in my mind that from what I saw, just making my own summations, Derek Chauvin is guilty of murder.
Thank you for that observations. Of course, the world witnessed him murder this guy. And so I think it was Al Sharpton that said it's not Derek Chauvin that's on trial, but America is on trial. What about you other fellas? Anybody else want to comment on the opening statement?
Well, I'll just piggyback on everything the pastor said. I'm as an attorney who gives opening statements and put witnesses on. I think what's important about the opening is that's where you want to outline the case, and then you want the witnesses to come back it up. And I think that's what we've seen so far. So you can give a great opening, but you have to be able to back it up. So I think the witnesses have been consistent in backing up what the prosecution wanted to show. So again, I'm just piggybacking on everything that's already been said. But that's what I kind of look for when I look for opening statements. Like, okay, you can say it, but can you back it up? And that's what I think we've seen.
Yeah, I agree. I believe the opening statement was very strong. Without a doubt, the entire world watched this play out. But we know in America that so many times these things happen. And will we see justice this time around is going to be, very interesting to see it play out, because so many times we see these cases in America, and these cops are, let off the hook. And so I agree with Al Sharpton. As he said, America is on trial, and it's going to be very interesting to see this play out in the days to come.
So you talk about some of the witnesses. They put some powerful people on the stand, and most of them were teenagers, and the youngest being 9 years old. Let's talk about some of those testimonies that stood out to you.
The one that stood out to me, Dr. J, was the dispatcher who was working the 911 calls. And what amazed me is how she was she walked us through every single step, and how she was watching, and she felt like something was off. And so she reached out, to the lieutenant who was on trial. But I thought her description and walking us through every single step was really, really good. It was powerful. It was without a doubt. I mean, she was knowledgeable of her job, but it was just amazing that she knew her job. They were asking her the different protocols, and she followed those protocols to the exact T, and she knew something was off. I thought hers was really, really, really strong.
Great. Anyone else? I did too. I really like how she talked about how when she was watching the camera that she thought it had frozen because they were still in that position for so long, and that was so powerful.
There was a police sergeant on late this afternoon with the Minneapolis Police Department, and he was going through the protocols of restraining people, and that was very strong, because there is a thing called a hobble. And a hobble is actually when suspects are hogtied, and they handcuffed behind their back, their legs are raised up, and the hobble has them to restrain them by having their legs and their hands restrained. It's like hogtying. And the question was, well, what's the next protocol? And the guy said, the next protocol is to roll them on their side. Why do you roll them on their side? Because keeping them on their stomach restricts the airways. Well, is that important? Because not only would you take somebody off of their stomach if there is no other pressure being applied to them, no other downward pressure? But would you ever put downward pressure on somebody who's already on their stomach, airways is being restricted? Would you then put pressure on them? And this police sergeant was saying, no, it wouldn't happen. Why wouldn't it happen? Because you would restrict the airways, and in a matter of minutes, the person is going to expire. I thought that was strong.
I think that overall, the witnesses were consistent and they came off as credible. And I think that's important when we look at what a jury has to consider. How consistent is each witness from witness to witness? How credible do they come off? And one thing in trials, witnesses aren't allowed to sit in the courtroom while other witnesses give testimony. So I think I think that helps their credibility, because they're not listening to what someone else said to develop their own version of what happened. So it makes all the witnesses even more credible when they're consistent. So that's what I saw. I saw a lot of consistent testimony, and I saw a lot of witnesses that came off as credible. And I think that the jury would consider those factors in determining his guilt.
Yeah, I agree with it's definitely the the defendants. When you look at everybody that's been on trial, they've been very consistent, very consistent. However, when we look on the other side, I just find it so interesting that in America, after we see this play out, how it also feels like George Floyd life is on trial, and we're using all kind of drugs in his system, all kind of things to lure away. Like today, I see where they were saying he wasn't calling for his mom because he had his girlfriend's or his girlfriend's name saved as mom in the phone, and just so many other different avenues that they're using. But I hope, back to Attorney Sweet's point, I hope the jury is looking at how consistent each person who's coming on trial is in their storytelling. It's quite compelling that everybody is consistent.
Look, I agree. Each one of those witnesses got up there and said the exact same thing, and said that they begged him for his life, begged him to stop. And they even talked about how they could see and tell that he was applying more pressure with his knee each and every time. And then, with his hand being in his pockets and him just being there so nonchalant. And then after what I think 3 minutes after he didn't have a pulse, he stayed on him even 3 minutes longer. Did you all see or hear any of those testimonies?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It was, but Duvalier said something that I think is worth exploring, and that is, and Brother Sweet said it also. The defense is going to try to put George Floyd on trial. We know that. We've been in this house for 17 years, and I apologize. And this smoke alarm has never, ever, never, ever gone out. And now the thing is beeping just like we just got in the house. I apologize for that. But I can't get up and change. Never happened before. Never, ever happened before. But you know what? And I think Brother Sweet can speak to this, better than me, because I'm not a lawyer. The prosecution is doing their best job of throwing out all of the flaws. That's what that's why she was on the stand today, to talk about the opioid abuse and addiction. They are doing everything that they can. Even the young man who was at the store at the Cup Foods, he talked about that George looked, a little high, But look, let me tell you what. When you live in the inner city of Minneapolis, Minnesota, it's going to be hard to find somebody who's not high about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. So that's not unusual. And these people go on with their lives just like everything is happening. but the prosecution is doing an excellent job of deflecting all of those things, like George Floyd's use, like him being a big guy, which was supposedly menacing to the police presence. They even had Chauvin actually saying that on the on the body cam tape. And let's not forget the 61-year-old gentleman yesterday who just broke down and cried on the stand. That was strong and so powerful, and that was for nothing more. What is that, Brother Sweet? That was more prejudicial than probative, and I'm telling you, but it was tugged at people's heartstrings. But I think the prosecution is doing a good job of making sure that the jury knows that George was not a saint. He was not the most perfect man in the world. But the bottom line is he did not deserve to die. Even if, and I hope they say this during the closing, even if the $20 bill was fake, and it was, he did not deserve to die for a fake $20 bill.
Even if he was high, even if he had all these other preconditions, he still didn't deserve to die.
I'll add
Absolutely.
to that I think the defense, they don't, we know they don't have defense. So the only strategy they can come up with is to try to dilute it and try to paint George out to be a bad guy. And it's just a shame that even when we have a case where we're supposed to be protecting a man's life and trying to find him justice in a country that you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, even the person that we're supposed to protect, when it's a black man that we're supposed to protect, he's guilty until proven innocent. And it's a shame the prosecution has to try to prove him innocent of anything. They shouldn't have to do that. But unfortunately, they're put in a situation where they're forced to defend his guilt. And it's just a shame that we're in that place in the country.
It is. And I do want to speak to the defense trying to put George Floyd on trial. And in his opening statements, he brought up all these things about his background, about his drug use, and about his other conditions that he had. And, you can't tell me if I put my knee on Derek's neck and back for 9 minutes and 29 seconds that he won't lose conscious. And so I thought that was another thing that came out in the trial, because for so long we all were saying 8 minutes and 46 seconds, but the prosecution brought up that it was 9 minutes and 29 seconds that he actually was on his the knee was on his neck. So what do you all think about that? Think about 9. Do y'all know how long 9 minutes and 29 seconds?
Right. And, even in looking at that, they also used the narrative that the crowd and the people reporting was also distracting. But when you look at it, and attorneys maybe help us with this, but force is supposed to be used to diffuse a situation or to when someone is resisting, right? And all of this in the 9 minutes, this man is pleading for his life. I can't breathe. He is pleading. And the only time on the camera where you see him really have some kind of, not even a really aggressive force was when they were getting him into the vehicle, right? So what was the force when he was there? Like, why was it so long? And for them to deflect to the crowd, I think was just another, like Attorney Sweet said, they don't have much to go off of. They're going to keep going off of his his reputation, but still, I think they're also wanting to paint those people who were recording. Had we not had those videos, would this story have been even shared? So I think when we look at the force part, I don't know if there's a case for the attorney can help us here. Force is used for resisting. Where in the video can the defense prove that he was resisting the whole 9 minutes, right?
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. And I think that's why this case is so important, because it puts a spotlight on the whole nation when we're talking about police and excessive force. Because we know that the force was excessive. And the defense is trying to use all of these tactics and trying to use these smoke and mirrors to make it seem like the officer's conduct was reasonable, when anyone with good common sense can look at it and say that's just not reasonable. And if they can get away with saying that this conduct is reasonable, then where does it stop? You know, where is the line of reasonableness drawn? And that's the standard. A lot of standards in a lot of states, they look at what is reasonable versus what's not in determining the amount of force. And I think that anyone who has a history in self-defense, martial arts, constricting the lungs, human anatomy, or just good common sense, people with good common sense can tell that's not reasonable conduct, and he was using too much force, excessive force, to restrain someone who wasn't fighting back.
Brother, you know, the thing that strikes me is, and Brother Sweet, you can speak to this. To me, now I was a news reporter for 20 years. So I was the news, and I was the law and politics reporter. So I spent the last 10 years of my life inside courtrooms every single day. And just like any other human being, I tried to play lawyer a couple of times, okay? It seems to me that the defense made a very strategic error when they placed as one of the three reasons that Chauvin did what he did. One reason was he was a large man who was menacing and they had to restrain him. The second reason was Chauvin did not kill him. He actually died from some underlying conditions and from his drug use. But the third reason they gave was, as Duvalier said, the crowd was menacing. Now they have that on record, and the first couple of times, especially with the paramedic lady, Genevieve, he literally tried to establish that line of reasoning. But I believe that was a strategic error, because the jury is hearing these people talk to Tao, because that's basically who they were talking to, Tao and Chauvin, and they weren't menacing. They were not aggressive. They were not a rowdy crowd. They were basically saying, get off the man. And if I am watching somebody die literally before my eyes, I'm going to raise my voice too. And I just think that was such a strategic error, Brother Sweet, to try and assign one of the reasons that they did not assist, or one of the reasons that Chauvin was distracted, was because of the aggressiveness of the crowd. Did anybody else see aggressiveness to the point where they felt like they had to call backup or a riot team or anything like that?
No, I think I didn't see any aggressiveness. And I think what the defense also tried to do was, in cross-examining the witnesses, try to rile the witnesses up that way to show that they had a propensity of being riled up and try to make some similarities between their conduct on the stand to how they would have acted at the time. And I don't think
they were subjectively biased, and that they were subjectively biased towards the prosecution's case.
Right. And I don't think they did a good job of that, but I saw what they were trying to do, and hopefully the jury saw it how I saw it, and hopefully they picked up on a strategy that the defense was trying to deploy, again, because they simply don't have a defense. So they have to try to do something to build a case.
So let me go to my number two, and I'll be quiet for a minute. My number two irrefutable known is Derek Chauvin. He got himself a bad attorney. And when I mean bad, I don't mean good. You know, this cat is groping at straws, man. He is really trying. But when you have when you have a client like this, Duvalier, when you have somebody who's obviously, remember my irrefutable known number one is that he definitely committed murder. When you have a client like that, it's going to be kind of hard to defend him any other way than what this man is trying to do already.
And I don't know if this is true. Maybe you guys have heard this, but I know I heard at the beginning of the case, and I don't know if it came out yet, but didn't George Floyd and this officer have some kind of encounter in the past?
Yes.
Prior to, and so because people were saying that as he was holding the and I don't know if this came out yet, but people that were there and was watching said that the officer looked like he was getting fulfillment out of this, like this wasn't restraints, but they were saying that the officer looked like he was getting fulfillment after this, like this was a payback.
The specific word they used was joy.
Right. So my point is, I don't know. I don't know what and the attorney can help us. I don't know whether or not he had an encounter with him in the past, but if he did, would that play into a role or some kind of also was this like him wanting to get back at George Floyd is what I'm trying to go at here.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've heard that they did have an encounter in the past and it wasn't a good one. I don't remember if that was introduced into evidence or not. I think that evidence can be beneficial and it can also hurt just depending on how it's introduced and who introduced it. For one, you can show motive and again, I don't know exactly what the prior conduct was, so it's kind of hard to guess on how it would help. But you could potentially show a motive if you can show a prior interaction between the two. But then on the flip side, you also can show a propensity to use force due to needing some form of self-defense. And again, I don't know if that's particularly the case, but it goes both ways. So it really depends on what the actual encounter was and then which side tries to introduce it.
Got it. And what do you guys think about the jury as they're painting George Floyd, in this way of, putting a bunch of, like the bad sides of everybody is human. So pointing out if they're putting our human lives on trial like this and the negative parts of it, do you guys think like white jurors may, if white people look at black men in a certain way and they look at us aggressive, do you think that white people on the jury would say, hey, this was it's justifiable force, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I took a class on American jury in DC. I went to George Washington and they had a whole class on juries. And they had some interesting statistics that just showed how the people devalue black men in the country. We're more likely to be found guilty if we're the ones on trial, or if we're the ones whose lives were lost. It's more likely that the person who killed us would be found not guilty. Not even mattering if the person was white, black, or what color. And the statistics were mind blowing to me. Like, these are things that I knew, but when I actually saw the numbers and saw how the jury system, what they really think about us, it's almost to the point where we're thought of as our lives are being less than dogs. And I had a case, I'm gonna tell this case real briefly, but I had a case of a young man who was shot in the back of the head. He was laying on the floor with his arms out. They shot him execution style, the back of his head in the depths of the sheriff's department shot him and killed him. And the officer ended up getting indicted based off the discovery that we did. And they had two trials. There were two mistrials, and the Attorney General's office didn't try him a third time. But we had a hard time getting him indicted. We finally got him indicted, and we had a hard time getting him found guilty. And the whole trial, the defense, they did the same thing. They tried to pin the situation on my young man because they said he was looking through car windows and he took off and ran. Whether he was looking through car windows or not, when he was on the floor, face down, arms spread out, he's not supposed to be shot in the head, the back of the head, execution style. But nothing was done for a long period of time. In that same police department, in that same county, it was Bolivar County, Mississippi, the same county, a police officer, or let me say this: the officer who shot my client, he was cleared. The sheriff's department cleared him. NBI cleared him. Everybody cleared him. They didn't do anything until we started doing discovery. Shortly after they cleared him, a officer shot and killed a dog. Someone called him out to the premises of a domestic dispute. He got to the neighborhood. He got to the house. The dog ran out. He shot the dog, killed the dog. He got disciplined. He almost got terminated. They had rallies, and it's just, you know, the months before that, you
are
kill a black
kidding
man,
me.
no discipline. A couple months later, they kill a dog, and it's a whole uproar. And that just speaks to the fact that our lives, a lot of time, are valued as less than the lives of a dog.
Well, let me speak to that, because I think here again we're going back to the prosecution, and I think that the prosecution was smart in two ways. And Brother Sweet, you are the expert, so I think we're deferring we're giving opinions, and we ask you to give the analysis. I think in two ways. Number one, I think the prosecution was smart to put Mr. Blackwell up to do the opening argument. And I believe that was smart, because what it did was it showed the jury the value of a black man's intellect and articulation, because I was very much impressed. But the most smart thing that they did was put George Floyd's girlfriend on the stand today. And I think the subliminal message behind that was, if he was valuable enough to have a white woman, and if she valued him enough to be his girlfriend, then you jurors, y'all got to value him enough to make sure that we protect his life and his right. I thought that was smart. This, you know, she wasn't, you know, you could tell that she was rode hard and put up wet a couple of times, and I mean that like an analogy of a horse. That's the only thing I mean. That's something we say about horses. But you could tell that they had her dressed up, fixed up, nicely dressed, had a complexion all smoothed over, and they were trying to send a message that George Floyd didn't have some hoochie mama crack woman. He had a white girlfriend. And I think that subliminally assisted the jury in valuing George Floyd's life just a little bit more. I do believe that.
And you know, Pastor James, I'm going to elaborate a little bit further, and then we can, like you said, turn to the attorney here. And Dr. J, you chime in too. But for me, this trial is America's justice system being on trial. Once again, when we look at this system, y'all, we looking at 1955. We saw, you know, what happened to Emmett Till, and we know that Trayvon Martin came after that, and so many more names that we can call tonight. And we see that there haven't been any justice. So I don't have any faith in the juror at this point, in the white juror. I just don't. I have no faith in that right now. Like the attorney opened up, is the opening statement is good, the consistency of the different people that are on trial, but we're just going to have to wait it out and see, will we get justice? And then we can all, you know, I'll write about it. We'll talk about it. But I don't have any faith right now in the justice system. This justice system have failed African Americans time and time again. We see how the media has portrayed the killer in Atlanta against the Asian American community. They refuse to, you know, show pictures, and they said, oh, we're not showing pictures because we don't want to elevate the profile. They refuse to dig and to do all of this stuff. And we see George Floyd life being on trial. And even on mainstream media, a lot of the commentators are not, you know, as strong and forceful to say, hold on, let's reel this back. George Floyd is not on trial. These are the facts. This is what happened. Millions and millions of people in America and across America watch this happen and go back to the facts. So at this point, I don't have any faith in the white jurors. At this point, I don't, Pastor. I just don't.
Doc, let me jump in here, and I certainly want to give everybody else a little time. But Duvalier, I've got to share my irrefutable known number 3 now. I got to do it because you brought it up and we both stole Doctor's thunder. But my irrefutable known number 3 is this jury can more than possibly acquit Derek Chauvin. I am not going to be surprised. That's my known number 3. I am not going to be surprised if he gets acquitted.
Listen, let me just show this clip. Then I'm going to let you respond to just remind people. I just want to remind people what can happen in cases like this. Let me share.
Okay.
As a week of pretrial motions ended today in the case of the 4 Los Angeles policemen already indicted in the Rodney King beating, the county grand jury signaled that will be the extent of the criminal case. 17 other so-called police bystanders at the beating scene will not be indicted, a development noted with frustration by the Los Angeles County Attorney, whose office presented the evidence.
Now, however morally wrong their failure to intercede, in California law, there is no criminal statute under which these officers can be indicted.
The inaction of the 17 officers may now be investigated by the U.S. Attorney's Office for possible civil rights violations. But of greater concern, said the county attorney, are the results of interviews with some of the police bystanders.
You know, I just had to remind people what happened after Rodney King, and that was on tape also.
Right now, because today's studio audience thinks that they've come to a
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Like I said, I've done this for some time. I've been in the battle. I've been in the trenches, and this justice system doesn't surprise me at all. Nothing surprises me. The truth is, it wasn't made for us. It just wasn't made for us, and we can try to make it work for us all we want. But if something is not made for, and Pastor, you know, if the soil ain't right, the vegetation ain't gonna grow from it. And this justice system has some bad soil, and we keep trying to patch over it like we're gonna get some good vegetation. But until we uproot it and come up with something different, that's what we're gonna get.
And see, I've been itching to give that example, the example that you and Doc and Duvalier made. I've been itching and really waiting to give an analogy in reverse. And this is my analogy in reverse. O.J. Simpson. We all thought, I thought, O.J. was going to be found guilty. There's no way that O.J. was going to be on trial for killing a good-looking white woman in Brentwood in Los Angeles, California, and be found not guilty. Now, obviously, the defense was good enough to pick an excellent jury, but I expected for O.J., just because of the sociological ramifications, I expected him to be found guilty, and he wasn't. And so if we don't know, you know, my irrefutable known number 3 is we don't know. We simply do not know if a jury will not impose jury nullification, and that's what this is going to be if he's acquitted. It will be nothing more than O.J. Simpson in reverse.
You know, I'm kind of obsessed with the O.J. Simpson case. Like, I still watch I go on YouTube and watch the case. You know, when I tell you how the defense made, when they played those tapes, when they made the cop seem suspect himself about planting evidence, and when he pleaded the fifth about planting evidence, all of that created doubt for the jury. And when you go and watch the series that they did about the O.J. Simpson case, and I watched both of them. I watched the real document, the real court case, and, you know, the series. And they did a great job of telling the story. And so, like I said, it was because of that one police officer, and that the fact that the glove did not fit So,
But Doc, you're making my point, and that's the point that I'm trying to make is what Brother Sweet said. This system was not made for us.
yeah, it's two different.
I was so immersed with the O.J. Simpson trial. We had VCRs then, and I still have the tapes. I was so immersed that I found 8-hour tapes, and I would put a tape in the machine in the morning and let that baby run all day long and record it. I have about 25 8-hour tapes of the O.J. Simpson trial, and that's the point that I'm trying to make. Just as a community activist, when you make a decision that the system is not meant for you, and you cannot get any justice. I didn't think the system was made for O.J. to get justice, despite the fact that evidence was planted, despite the fact that and I'm still saying the same thing about this whole George Floyd thing. I don't think the system was made for George Floyd. And I don't think that George Floyd, I don't believe, I'm not assured, I'm not confident that George Floyd is going to get justice, because the system at its kernel basic nature is not made for us. And look, if that jury didn't hear, if it don't fit, you must have quit, OJ would probably be sitting on death row right now for that thing. But the evidence was just too compelling.
You froze
The system
up.
is not made for us. So I don't think we have an assurance that Derek Chauvin is going to be found guilty. I have no confidence whatsoever.
So let me ask the panel this: what do you guys, what do you think that needs to happen? I mean, I understand, like, we're in the middle of this pandemic, and the current administration is not moving forward with the George Floyd legislation that's in the Senate right now, the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act that's in the Senate right now, that has some other legislation that talks about police reform, etc. What do you think, like, attorney, like, you see these cases all the time, what do you think needs to happen to make this move forward? Because we know legislation is only as good as it's implemented at the state and local levels, but what needs to happen?
That's a very hard question. I don't think that I have that answer. I have a lot of opinions on little things I think we can do. I think there's a thing called qualified immunity, and I saw that New York just got rid of that. But that's a law that protects police officers from basically anything. And there's a lot of laws that we can change in that effect. But the problem is so deep rooted. I don't think one person can honestly sit and say they have the answers. Sometimes I'm smart enough to know when I'm not smart enough to know something. So I mean, I know what the issues are. I think it's so many different factors. We have to really get in these communities. I think on an individual level, what we can do personally is we can keep the fight going in our own lives. We can continue to spread the knowledge that we have. We can motivate and talk to these young kids. We can go on the Capitol, and we can talk to our legislatures. I can keep doing my cases. Y'all, Pastor, you keep preaching the word. Duvalier, am I saying your name right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And you can keep preaching the word in DC and giving commentary. And Dr. J, I know you're in the trenches every day. So I mean, it just takes us doing, each of us doing our parts. Now, as far as like legally the laws, there's a lot of different laws that need to change. And I always tell all my students this, because when we talk about why the police have so much protection, I'm tell y'all real short. I don't want to go to school, but generally, so we have an understanding of why the law is set up the way it is. We got our law from the English common law. That's why it's called common law or case law. Okay, and that was the Queen's law. So you also can call it Queen's law. The number one law the Queen had was you can't sue the Queen in the Queen's court. Okay. Rule number 2, you can get the thou shalt not kill, you can't rob, you can't steal X, Y, and Z. But rule number 1 is you can't come for me. That's the rule that she started with. So when when they started developing America, they took that common law and implemented it over here. And they said, rule number one is you can't sue the government in the government's courts. And the government extends to the people who are working for the government. So you can't bring action against certain people. That's civilly and criminally. Now we can do it, but when you do it, it's extremely hard. Civil rights law is extremely hard to do. And I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it's one of the hardest areas of law. And it's made like that on purpose because they don't want you to sue them. And also going against government officials criminally is extremely hard to do. We look at all the laws Trump broke, and he's still sitting at home free. When you have that protection, it's extremely hard to come at you. And that's because we got our laws, again, not for us. We got our laws from the old common law. So it's a deep rooted problem. The problem is deeply rooted in the foundation of the country. So I don't know. I don't have all the answers on how to, what we can do about that, other than each day we can do, all do our part.
And do you all
Let me take a stab.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me take a quick stab at it. I won't be long. I agree with you. I don't think any of us have any answers. But I don't know if that was Duvalier's question. Duvalier's question was, what can we do? I didn't hear him ask what were the answers. Let me tell you what we can do. What we can do is the same thing the anti-war movement did in the 60s. The same thing that the civil rights movement did in the 60s and the 70s. I have been preaching this, I advocate this, and I believe this in my heart. The only way to get these people's attention is for us to take to the streets en masse again. I mean, just march, take to the streets. And thousands of us need to take to the streets the same way we did to protest George Floyd's murder. We need to take to the streets to protest. Let me finish by saying this. In the Bible, there is a parable by Jesus that talks about a woman who kept taking her case to an unjust judge. Jesus called him an unjust judge. And Jesus said, but because of her importunity, and I learned that word, importunity is only used one time in the Bible, importunity. And Jesus said, because of her persistence, because she kept going back to petition her case, the judge eventually ruled in her favor. We have lost our importunity. We're not taking to the streets. We're not collectively en masse protesting the injustices that are being perpetrated upon us. So what can we do, Duvalier? I don't know if this is the answer, but one of the things that we can do is to begin again to take to the streets. I believe that's one of the only solutions. Well, I'm sorry, don't strike that because the lawyer's listening. Not one of the only solutions, but that's one of the only things that we can do.
I agree, and I honestly believe that we also have to hold this new administration accountable. I believe that we need to push forth the George Floyd legislation that's there. I believe we need to push forth the Emmett Till legislation that's there. I believe that the administration should be having roundtables with leaders across this country, advocating for justice for George Floyd. I don't think it's time for them to be silenced. I don't think it's time for people with a platform in a national, international pulpit to apply pressure. And I agree with you, Pastor, because when we look at Dr. King, when Dr. King had the march on Washington, John Kennedy was not on board. The president was not on board. But when he saw that over 250,000 people from all over the country and the world came to make sure that voting rights and equality for African Americans were on the table, he called Dr. King and John Lewis back over to the White House, and we started to see some progress towards change. So I agree with you, Pastor, that I think people should be, continue to take to the street and apply that pressure. But I also think that our lawmakers have to do their jobs. And I think this administration I understand we're in a pandemic, but it's also a pandemic in the streets. Every day when we see what is happening to African Americans, dying at the hands of the police. And now we just are able to shed a light on it with recording and cameras. But I think this has to be addressed by this administration.
Listen, you guys, I do want us to address, do we think that this jury will convict Derek Chauvin of murder or not? What are your thoughts? Will he be convicted of murder?
I don't think
I have
so.
my serious doubts.
I believe in speaking
I have
positivity, so
my
I'm gonna
serious
say
doubts.
I'm gonna say yes. They're gonna convict him.
If convicted of anything, they might convict him of manslaughter.
I'm normally with the attorney. I'm normally
Man,
very
that's good, bro.
optimistic.
Sweet. I mean, that's strong
Yeah.
right there.
I'm normally with the attorney. I want to say, we're going to see, justice and he'll be convicted. But I'm optimistic, right? At this point, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Listen,
What's your thought, Dr. J?
I was about to say exactly what Brother Samuel Clark just posted, that Dr. King said riots are the language of the unheard. If they do not convict this man, we're going to remodel America. That's what's going to happen. These young people going to get out there and they're going to remodel America. That's what's going to happen. Look at what they did in LA after the Rodney King. That just was in LA. This was witnessed worldwide. People are going to show their disappointment. Watch what I tell you. Just don't let them do the right thing. What y'all think about that?
No, I agree.
But see,
I agree. Social unrest will be there.
that's almost unfortunate. And
You kind of breaking up, Doc, Pastor. Yeah, we can't. You're not coming through clear. But I did want to point out how the defense kept saying that Derek was doing what he was trained to do. So the training is one of the problems as well.
Absolutely. A lot of times police aren't trained to actually respect the Constitution, people's constitutional rights. Their training is not parallel to constitutional rights. And I've seen that. I've done these cases time and time again, and I've seen the police protocols. I've seen the handbooks. I've seen the
people power. Okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't know you were on too.
Your phone was breaking up. His phone.
That might be the internet telling me I need to.
Yeah, but I've taken these police depositions. I mean, I've seen the instructions, and they're a lot of times they're taught to violate people's rights. So that's just a problem within itself. The entire training needs to be changed.
Well, we have some people in the comments saying they believe that he will be convicted. Like, that is my prayer, my hope that he will be convicted, because the evidence is overwhelming. There's no reason for this man to have his knee in this man's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. 9 minutes and 29 seconds. So we definitely have to hold the justice system accountable. And I do think, like Malone said, it has to be some type of bills put on the table to address these issues. It's not just going to go away. This whole system is flawed, and if we don't help address and fix this system, I mean, it's just like when you're writing a paper. I think they need to ball it up and start all over, because, like you said, The whole system is messed up because it started off with the slave patrols, and that's what they doing now. They only patrolling the black people, and that's what they were initially, founded to do. So
That's, as the kids say, those are facts. Big facts.
look, what the kids say, no lies, no lies.
No cap.
So let's kind of give our final thoughts on, we just 3-4 days into the case. What would you like to see, and what are some of your final thoughts?
Am I up first? I see I'm at the top of the screen. I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to say he is convicted, but what I will say, whether he is convicted or whether he is acquitted, we still have a lot of work to do. So we need to be diligent and steadfast on our work, and we need to have a plan and an agenda either way. This is just a battle. This is not the end of the war. So no matter what happens, we need to be prepared to keep fighting.
I love it.
Well, my final, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My final thoughts are, I'm going to try to be as optimistic as Attorney Sweet. I'm going to do my best, the best I can to maintain. But what I really hope is, I hope that this whole George Floyd saga will be in Hill and Rosa Parks put together. I would love to see our people motivated and mobilized and angry and hitting the streets and everything we can to be proactive, to use soul force and people power to assert pressure on the governmental agencies and on local officials and just on our own community alone. Because remember, when Black folk were taken to the streets in the 60s and 70s, they weren't just talking to white folks. They was talking to the Black folk who didn't want no part of it. And we still have Black folk who don't want no part of it. So I hope that we will mobilize and be motivated to start, taking our communities back.
I would say, I am not optimistic at all. I don't have any faith in a system that wasn't built for us. But I do believe that this is an opportunity for us to see what side of justice America is really on. And so for somebody who has no faith in the system at this point, I do think a conviction will definitely help to start the process of us having faith in our systems again. So definitely that's where am on that. But I do believe that in order for us to see true change in our community, we are going to, like the pastor said, we got to apply that activist pressure, as well as holding the people who represent us here in Washington accountable to begin to push those legislations and those laws through so that we can see that it's starting from the top. And I think that needs to happen immediately. It's not something that needs to wait until this pandemic is over. This is affecting people every day all across America.
I hope everybody hears what Duvalier said, because to me, that's going to be my walking away point. My walking out of everything that's being said, what Duvalier was, we have got to put pressure on this administration. Uncle Joe is going to have to step up, y'all. I mean, I'm country. I'm Mississippi country. But Uncle Joe is going to have to step up. He's going to have to take the lead. He's going to have to assemble a Blue Ribbon Committee on civil and human rights. And he's going to have to seize the moment to speak up and stand up for Black folk and people of color in this country. Thank you, Duvalier, because you just gave me a new impetus.
Yes, and it can't be fluff. It can't be fluff. It has to be people who are in the trenches, who know what's going on in their community. It cannot be fluff. This administration has to bring people around the table who are affected by this, not people around the table who's doing research on this. He needs people at the table who are working and doing the job and that are representing these people every single day. It has to be at the ground level, bringing them a seat at the table here in DC. Has to be. And Black people don't need to forget that this administration, it owes them a lot. And,
Yes.
and this administration made a lot of promises, and they need to come through on these promises. But the only way we can get that done is when we look at anything that has happened. A lot of times, people who don't have a seat at the table are not in the White House, right? So, I mean, a lot of people don't have a seat at the table, so they're not in the White House. So when we look at these organizations, you're going to have the NAACP, you're going to have the Urban League, you may have a representative from Black Lives Matter movement, and they're going to be inside of the White House, right? And we can't always expect that our agendas are going to be on the table with these big organizations. So it goes back to your point, Pastor, while they're in there, it needs to be people in the street protesting and making sure their ideas are being elevated in the media, elevated on social media, so that what they're pushing for can get pushed through. So we have to understand that too, that we got to apply the pressure. I can't say that enough. People have to apply the pressure on this administration.
I just have to agree, that if we're not at the table, we're going to constantly be on the menu. And that's where we find ourselves, on the menu. They are eating us for lunch. Until we are tired of being people dinner, we got to, show up and hold people accountable. And we do that by holding them accountable at the voting booth. That's one of our powers that we don't talk about and use enough. So we can get all those people out of the White House, the Capitol, and even local if they're not doing what they're supposed to do. But never in all my years of being on this earth and reading history have I seen anything change without bloodshed. And that's sad. In order for this country, this nation, to make a significant change, blood always have to be shed. And that's sad. And so I really thank you all so much for, being a part of this conversation. I would like for us to convene again sometime throughout this trial. How long do you think this trial will last, attorney?
I'm having a problem hitting my mute, but I honestly don't know. I would have a better answer if I would. I have myself been in court all day today, so I haven't been watching it today, so I'm not exactly sure where they are. I've watched it from a lot of clips because I'm working when it's going on, doing a lot of the same stuff that we're talking about. Exactly. So I don't want to give y'all the wrong guess on it, but usually trials like this can last. Well, the OJ trial lasted for a long time. It's not that extensive, but maybe a week or two. But I don't want to, guess wrong.
Oh wow, yeah. Great. So thank you all so much, and I hope that we can come back, throughout this trial and just break it down. And most people don't have the opportunity to watch, and I do think we learn a lot by watching these different trials, because you just never know when you or your family member may be in a similar situation. So you can definitely learn a lot by watching these cases. Again, thank you all so much, and I will see you all sometime soon.